Good day, grade 12. Today we are looking at the last profit maximization position or the last equilibrium position. Remember, this is the last of 3 lessons regarding the essay question. All right, remember your essay question will be with graphs or use graphs to illustrate the 3 profit maximization positions or the 3 equilibrium positions of the individual producer in the perfect market. Okay, so we said we are on page 20, still on page 20, and we said that in the short run, there are 3 possibilities. In the short run, your individual producer can either make a normal profit, that was the first one we did, or they can make an economic profit, that's yesterday's lesson, or today's lesson they can make an economic loss. Now, there are 3 possibilities in the short run. Okay, so on page 20, we are looking at the losses today, okay, an economic loss. So if the market price falls below the average cost of the individual producer, obviously he's going to make an economic loss. Remember your market price, just remember you can write it on your notes if you want to. The market price equals the average revenue. So in other words, what we are saying, if the average revenue or the price is less than the average cost of an individual product, now averages refers to one product, obviously there will be an economic loss. In other words, the revenue that we receive is not enough to cover the cost of production. Okay, now whether or not the firm will continue producing depends on the level of the average revenue or the average price relative to the average variable cost. Remember, last week we have done the shutdown rule. Okay, remember each individual producer has to make 2 output decisions. The first decision, he has to decide if he is going to continue production or if he is shutting down. The second choice he has to make is if he continues production, what is the output level, the quantity that he is willing to produce at the current market price. Okay, now remember when we did the shutdown rule, I did say that when a firm is making a loss, that will be the first warning sign of maybe considering shutdown. Okay, remember a loss doesn't guarantee that the business is going to shut down. Whether or not he's going to shut down will depend on the average revenue or the price and the average variable cost. We said if your average revenue, your price, is lower than the average variable cost, the firm will shut down. If the price is still higher than the average variable cost, although the firm is making a loss, they will not shut down. Okay. But any price lower than the average variable cost, just fill in average there, okay? Any price lower than the average variable cost, the firm is going to shut down. Okay, and remember on the graph, we did draw this last week also. Shutdown point on a graph will occur where price is equal to average variable cost. Below this point, the producer will not be willing to produce because the price that he's receiving is not even enough to cover the average variable cost. The cost involved in the actual production of your item, the ingredients of your article is more expensive than what you're actually receiving for it. So your price doesn't even cover the direct costs involved in the production of that article. Okay, now in the perfect market, it is only possible for any individual business to make a loss in the short run. In the long run, a loss is impossible because this is the perfect market and there's freedom of entry and exit. So firms that are making losses, they are not going to stay in this industry. They are going to withdraw their investment and they're rather going to invest their money in a different industry where they are actually able to make a profit. Okay, so when a business is making a loss in the short run, what will happen in the long run is that some firms will shut down, obviously, and some firms will actually leave this industry to go and make an investment in a different industry. All right, but what is going to happen there we will discuss in a subsequent lesson. Right. Basically, when a firm is making a loss, it means that my total revenue is less than my total cost. Okay, my earnings is less than my production cost. Or if we look at averages, it means that my average revenue is less than my average cost. All right, total revenue is less than total cost. Average revenue is less than average cost. When we put this information on a graph, okay, if we are saying that the average revenue is less than the average cost, that means, remember I said previously also, that where we place our average cost on a graph will determine if that producer is making a profit or a loss. So when we are drawing a graph that indicates a loss, it means that my average cost graph has to be higher than my average revenue. So in here you can see now the pink graph, that's my average revenue. So when I put in my average cost, it has to be above my average revenue. That means that average cost is higher than average revenue, which means a loss is going to be made. At this point, you are going to draw the graph with me. Looking at this graph, you can't just say, yeah, I can draw this, it's easy peasy. You need to draw it yourself to practice the drawing of the graph. So right now, you are going to pause this video so that you can take out your workbook and your different colors for the graphs, and you are going to draw this graph with me. As I draw it, you are drawing it also. Okay, at this point, you pause the video and take out everything that you need. Okay, if we now draw, okay, we're going to start with your axis. And we label our axis because if there's no labeling, there's no marks. And this is marks that is easy to get. Easy giveaway, Christmas present marks. Just to label your axis. Okay, the vertical axis, as always, is going to be cost and revenue. Okay, it will be in rand. And then your horizontal axis is quantity or output. Right, then also remember every single graph must have a heading. If there's no heading, they don't know which graph you are drawing. No heading, basically, no marks. In this case, what we are drawing is the individual producer making an economic loss. Right, so your heading is going to be economic loss. We're drawing the individual producer in the perfect market still. But in this case now we are drawing his graph to indicate that he's making an economic loss. Okay, spelling mistake. Okay, economic loss. Okay, there's your heading. Okay, then we are going to follow our recipe. Hopefully you have your recipe in front of you still. The one that you were handed out on Monday. Make sure that you take it out. It's on the desk in front of you because we're going to follow them step by step. Okay, so in step 1, we are supposed to draw demand and average revenue and marginal revenue. That is step 1. Step 1, we draw demand, average revenue and marginal revenue. We know that we are in the perfect market. In the perfect market, each individual producer is a price taker. So if the market says the price is 10 Rand, our demand curve will be a horizontal line, perfectly elastic demand curve at the level of the market price. As you draw your graph, you're also labeling your graph. And remember, price equals average revenue. So your demand curve also represents your average revenue curve. And then because this is the perfect market and the price is constant in the perfect market, your marginal revenue also equals your price. So this one horizontal demand curve represents D equals AR equals MR. So step 1, we draw demand, average revenue and marginal revenue is only one graph. Okay, this is step 1. Then in step 2, we have to add marginal cost. We know marginal cost looks like the Nike swooshy. So when we add in the marginal cost, we just do it. And we label. Immediately you label your graph, otherwise you're going to forget. And if there's no label, there is no mark. Step 3 is we have to indicate our profit maximization point. Remember, profits are maximized where marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. So my purple graph is my marginal revenue, my red graph is marginal cost. Where the two graphs intersect, we make our nice big bolletjie. No bolletjie, no mark. And then we label profit maximization point is always point E. At profit maximization, we have to indicate now the price and the quantity. Because this is a perfect market, your price is indicated already. If you forgot to write a price there, you do it now. Otherwise, there's no marks. And then we just indicate the quantity. Now, the quantity is on the horizontal axis. So we need to find what is the output level. The profit maximizing output level in this case will be 100. And that is step 3. When we go now to step 4, in step 4, we have to add the average cost graph. Now remember what we said, it is all about the placement of the average cost. Where we place average cost will make this an economic profit or an economic loss or a normal profit. Every single graph that we have drawn up to this point has looked like this. Okay, every single graph has looked like this, okay? But where we put the average cost, that it makes all the difference. Before we add the average cost graph, remember the shape of the average cost graph, it looks like a smiley, U-shaped. It has a relationship with marginal cost. It must intersect with marginal cost. And marginal cost must intersect with average cost where average cost is the lowest. Plus then, we want this guy to make an economic loss. An economic loss means that my average revenue must be lower than my average cost. Now, that is what a loss implies. My revenue is less than my cost. All right. So when we draw the graph, we have to make sure that my average cost is above my average revenue, because average revenue has to be lower than average cost for this guy to make a loss. So again, watch at what I am doing first. Don't draw. If I put my average cost there, what is wrong with my average cost? Okay, what is wrong with my average cost? It is not intersecting with my marginal cost. It can't be here in the random in the middle of nowhere. It's hanging there like a lost fart. No, that is not correct. It has to intersect with marginal cost. All right. So watch what I'm doing and then you are going to do it as well. When I draw my average cost, remember I'm going down, 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 down until I touch my marginal cost. It has to be above the average revenue, so it has to be higher. It can't come close to my demand curve. But I'm going down, down, down until I touch my marginal cost. After this, I have to turn up because my lowest point of average cost here has to intersect with marginal cost. So we go down, down, down. It's the easy way to do it. As soon as I touch marginal cost, then I know this has to be the bottom. So now I have to turn up. And then I label immediately. I label my graph average cost. Okay. You can pause the video now and then you add your average cost. When we continue, step 5, we now have to find out what is my average cost. Now we have to do the shading. So we need to know at my profit maximization point, what is the value of my average cost? I have to find the value of my average cost. So because my average cost is above my equilibrium point, I'm going to move up. Dotiki, 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 up, up, up until I touch my average cost graph. And there I'm going to make another boliki. And at this boliki, up, 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 where I touch my graph, make a boliki. And at the boliki, I have to go to the side to find out what is the value of my average cost. And I give it a value. Okay, I've made mine 12. Okay. The last thing that we have to do is we have to shade. Now we have to shade the area of the economic loss. Again, same as with the economic profit. Remember, when I do the shading, my shaded area must be a regular shape. It cannot be a random thing. It has to be a rectangle or a square, depending on how you have drawn your graph. Okay, it cannot be a rectangle with a pimple on its face. Okay, what is going to determine your shaded area? There's your dotiki, dotiki, dotikis, up to your boliki, down, dotiki, 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 to your boliki, and then back to the axis on your graph. This is the area that you are going to shade. But you're not going to go past these dotted areas. If you shade up to your marginal cost curve, it's going to look like a rectangle with a pimple on its face. We don't want that. Nobody likes pimples. The graph doesn't like pimples either. Okay, so when we shade, we are shading from this dotted area all the way to this dotikis here, down and back to the axis. Okay, so you're shading, shading, and remember what I said in the previous lesson, you do your shading preferably with a highlighter so that you can see, in this case, there is no graphs underneath. Okay, with economic profit, there's always graphs underneath. In this case, there are no graphs underneath it, okay, but it's just good practice. Now, if you have a highlighter, you use it. If you don't have one, you use whatever, pencil, pen, whatever you have, but you have to shade your area. If you don't shade your area or you shade your area incorrectly, you will not get the 2 marks that this is worth. Okay, this shaded area represents your economic loss. Okay, I am now going to put this in another document so that we can also look at the calculations and different possible questions that can be asked based on this. Right, this is our graph. Just going to make it smaller. Okay. We are now going to look at different questions that can be asked based on this graph. Now, you must be able to draw it. In an essay question, you will be required to draw the graph, but in a data response question, you must also be able to interpret this graph. Okay, so they can give you the graph and ask you questions on this graph. Obviously, if they give you a data response question, there will be more than just this. Now they're going to add random graphs in here. They're going to have random other points, other quantities, prices that is not relevant because you have to be able to find the relevant information. Okay, so as I mentioned in the previous lessons, what they're going to ask you, for example, which market structure is represented by the graph above? You see the horizontal demand curve, immediately you know this is a perfect market. They can ask you, in this graph above, is the individual producer making an economic profit or an economic loss? Okay, obviously then there will be no heading. The heading kind of won't be there, obviously. Okay, so you will look, if my average cost is above my average revenue graph, obviously my costs are more than my revenue, it would be an economic loss. They can ask you to define something, okay, either one of the costs or revenues, or what is a perfect market, what is an economic loss, what is a market structure, what is a market, any definition. And then they can ask you to explain, any explanation there. Why is this firm making an economic loss? What is going to happen if there is an economic loss? They can add an average variable cost graph in here, and they can ask you something about shutdown. Lot of stuff. What is the profit maximizing output? 100. A whole bunch of questions that they can ask you based on this. In the next activity, you are going to be practicing a lot of data response questions. I've given you a lot of them because this is easy marks if you can do it, and they ask it without fail. Every single paper 2, you will get a data response question with a graph. If it's not the perfect market, it will be the monopoly or the oligopoly or monopolistic competition, but some or other graph will definitely be there. Microeconomics is about graphs, so you cannot avoid graphs in paper 2. Okay, very important. What they're going to ask you is to calculate the total economic loss. Now, with any calculation, remember, we have to show our calculations. If you don't show your calculations, even if your answer is correct, you get 1 out of 4. You are throwing your marks away by being lazy. So rather just follow your instructions and show your calculations. Okay, now we know that to calculate profit or loss, your calculation is total revenue minus total cost. Okay, if they ask you to calculate the total economic loss, okay, that is your formula. But we don't have total revenue, we don't have total cost. We have to calculate it first. So total revenue is price times quantity. You must know your formulas. If you can't do this, it's 4 marks, bye-bye. Okay, so price, again, you look at your graph. You need to identify your profit maximization point. Profits are maximized when marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. So point E is my profit maximization point. The price is determined by my demand curve. So on my demand curve, I can see that my price is 10 Rand. The quantity they're referring to is your profit maximizing output. At 10 Rand, how much will this individual producer be willing to produce? You go down, it is 100. All right, so your total revenue is 1,000 Rand. Now you still need to calculate your total cost. I said before, we can no longer calculate it as fixed cost plus variable cost because we don't have that information on our graph. What we need to do is we use our new formula, which is average cost times quantity. So on the graph, at profit maximization point, we find what is my average cost. I go up, up, up. There is my average cost graph. Okay, so at that bolletjie that I've drawn, my average cost is 12 Rand. My corresponding quantity, down, down, down. It is still 100. All right, so my total cost is 1,200 Rand. So now I can go back to this formula and I can fill in the missing information. My total revenue was 1,000. My total cost was 1,200. So my loss is minus 200 Rand. You have to indicate the minus. That minus indicates actually the loss. Okay, so your profit or loss is total revenue minus total cost. And if your answer is negative, it indicates a loss. Okay, again, I'm going to show you the next method. Okay, you are writing down both of them, and then afterwards you can choose the one that you like the best. Okay, economic loss per unit is my total revenue minus my total, average. Average revenue minus average cost. All right, that is your formula to calculate the loss per unit. Okay, so for one, if I was producing only one article, how much loss would I be making with every single one I'm selling? Again, same thing. We go to our profit maximization point. I look, what is my average revenue? My average revenue is the pink one. So my average revenue is 10 Rand. Average revenue equals the price. What is my average cost? At profit maximization point, up until I touch average cost. My average cost is 12 Rand. So the economic loss per unit, every single one we sell, we are selling at a loss of 2 Rand. Okay, but the question is not asking what is my economic loss per unit. The question is asking what is my total economic loss. Am I selling just one? No, I'm selling how many? I'm selling 100. All right, so total economic loss will then be my economic loss per unit times by my how many am I producing. My loss per unit is 2 Rand, and we said how many am I selling at equilibrium point? I'm selling 100. So my total economic loss again is 200 Rand loss. Okay, as I said, don't throw away the minus. The minus is what indicates that it is a loss. Okay, doesn't matter which of these methods you use, if you use the first method or if you use the second method. As I said previously, the only danger with using the second method is that you calculate this and then you tell me, oh, the answer is minus 2 Rand, a 2 Rand loss. Lies. We are not just selling one. If you do the second method, you have to remember to multiply by the quantity. If you stop there, you're going to get 2 out of 4 instead of 4 out of 4. You have to calculate the total economic loss. Okay, so be careful. Look at what they are asking. Okay, that is it for today.